And the worst part is, like, this was a disgusting place, like really genuinely dangerous to live in. And it was daycare.
Champagne for my real friends, real pain for my sham friend.
I'd rather have a bottle in front of me instead of having a frontal lobotomy. I mean, it's so good.
He just has this amazing knack for deconstructing little words and creating these clever little limericks.
You are listening to Tape Spaghetti, a show about the twisted and tangled innards of the music industry. Some of this content may not be for all listeners or viewers, so if it isn't for you, no harm, no foul. We'll just catch you on the next one. All right, without further ado, let's get into this episode. Here we go. Apologies, folks. I just have one quick note. We've been working on this podcast for a little while before we actually launched it, and it originally had a different name. We realized that name was taken, so as you know, because you clicked on this, it is now called Tape Spaghetti, not Riff Session, and so that is why we refer to it as that here a couple times in these first few episodes. But after a while, it'll all smooth out. All right, folks, that's enough. Let's get into it. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the show. You're here with Scott and Blake, and this week, Scott's going to drop some knowledge on us.
Oh, it's my turn again?
Yeah. Yeah.
I thought it was your turn.
Well, this is going to be an awkward episode then, because I am only half done with my episode research. So weird.
I think I can handle it.
Okay.
I think we're going to be all right. To start off, I'm curious, Blake, what was your second job?
My second job?
Your second job. Everyone remembers their first job. That's like, usually you're like, oh man, those were the days. I wish I could go back to, when I used to take tickets at the dump. But that second job, that's what I'm curious about.
I had you talking like full-time jobs? I had a lot of jobs.
I don't know, man. Interpret it however you like.
Okay, my first job was working like official jobby job, not like mowing lawns for grandparents or something. Would have been working in vineyards, tying up grapevines and things like that.
Really? I didn't know that.
Yeah. There was a vineyard right across the street from my parents' house, which is now all houses. I worked in that one. And then there was some other local ones that I worked in here and there for whatever reason. I don't really know how that happened. I can't remember.
That's amazing.
Anymore. Yeah.
I mean, I'm from Indiana, so the nearby agriculture, it was just corn and maybe some soybeans. There was certainly no vineyard nearby.
Yeah, it was literally across the street. I grew up looking at the vineyard. It was very nice to look at, and also hearing the sounds of cannons going off because they had these propane powered cannons they would use to scare the birds away.
What? Mm-hmm. That's amazing.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Huh. So I imagine the people that work in vineyards, I imagine them all being like, these very sommelier-y, highfalutin folks that are like, just want to be close to the viticulture, whatever it is, of wine. But if you were there as a teenager, I can't imagine that's the case.
Yeah, as like a 13-year-old. So yeah, it was, I had maybe snuck a sniff or two of the wine in my day, but I was no sommelier for sure. But I thought it was cool. I thought it was like fun it was kind of a weird thing to do. It was fun to talk about with people. They're like, you work in a vineyard? I'm like, yeah, I work at a winery. Mm-hmm. And yeah, so that was my first job. My second like real jobby job probably would have been working for a restoration company.
What does a restoration company do? What were you restoring?
When your house catches on fire, you call these guys and they fix it.
Like the people you called when your house caught on fire.
Yeah, exactly.
Was that the same company?
It was.
Or oh, really? Okay. Yeah. So they can't have been.
This is
I feel like there's a lot of places I've worked that I'd be like, well, I'd never call them.
Oh, absolutely. No, I knew they'd take good care of me because they always did a good job when I worked for them. So the owners really care about the client's experiences there. So I call it, they were my first call. But yeah, that was a terrible job though. Like not because of them, but because working in a hoarder's house that caught on fire is not fun. Man. It's not fun at all. There was literally, I was unloading boxes out of their basement and I literally took a box off of the top of another box to hand to, my coworkers who was helping me unload. And I took a box off of it, and on top of that box was a rat that they went, "Oh no, a rat." And they threw the other box on it and left it there.
Oh no!
So it was like,
this is a long dead, long since dead, like half crushed rat.
Half crushed. I'm like, well, that's disgusting. And that's just like one example. They had like 18 Kirby vacuums stashed in various parts of the house, which there's no way they ever even thought about using. It was an experience, to put it mildly. And the worst part is, like, this was a disgusting place, like really genuinely dangerous to live in. And it was a daycare.
Oh no.
I was like, who's letting their kids stay here? Not in a million years. But
man, I mean, daycare is expensive. I feel like
I don't think this one was super expensive.
Yeah, that's what happens when you look for the discount on that. Well, that's wild. So, as you could imagine, I was asking you this about yourself just so I could tell you the answer to the same question about myself.
Yeah, I was gonna say, what was your second job?
Yeah, well, so, to begin with, my first job, and a lot of thought went into this. Like, once I'd been kind of working forever for my parents. We did craft fairs and stuff. So like you, like I'd always been working since, I was like 3 or whatever in some capacity.
Totally.
But once I like turned, 15 or 16 or whatever, and I was like of age to go get like a W-2 job, like a real jobby job. I was like looking at all sorts of different things, and I saw that the Indianapolis Zoo was hiring for like the people that would be the announcers at the dolphin show.
Oh, yes.
And they like hired young kids. Yeah. So like my mom, drove me down, and I did the audition to be one of the announcers at the dolphin show. And I did like, I think all right, but I was like, number 2 in their spot. So they're like, look, we're going to level with you. We've already kind of got somebody for this. Like, you're not going to get this job, but we're opening a new building at the zoo. That's the Oceans building that has, amongst other things, a shark touch tank. And we're going to need people that can run the shark touch tank. And, we like you, not as much as that other girl, but we like you, reasonably well. What if you did this job? And so, I'm like 16. I'm like, oh my God, yes, give me that job. That's amazing. And so I get the job, and we open the shark touch tank. And it's, it's these like dog sharks that are swimming around, and like, it's mostly like telling kids like, here's how to touch the shark. Use these 2 fingers. Please don't grab the sharks. Spoiler, the kids totally grab the sharks.
Of course they do.
Which was bad for the sharks. It was maybe an ill-conceived idea, but it was a big hit. I mean, we had people from all over coming down to the Indianapolis Zoo to like touch a shark.
Can I touch the shark? I don't touch the shark, baby. Let me get a piece of that shark.
Yeah, get on here. Exactly. And it was a blast. I had a great time. Hanging out at the zoo was incredible. I got to like park, because I like very quickly thereafter got my driver's license, and I got to park underneath where the like bears were. So I would like look up through the sunroof of my Pontiac Grand Am, and I could see sometimes like a bear looking down at me, and I'd park and lock my car and then go into work. It was the best job ever. And honestly, I feel like this is something of a theme for some people with their early jobs. Like, I would rather just do that job forever, except that it was not enough money to like live on per se.
Great teenager job, but that's about it.
Yes, but I would like readily go back to that if I could. And also, like 16-year-old me, it was a good dating scene at the Indianapolis Zoo.
Oh,
because there were all sorts of like volunteers that were like girls my same age that wanted to volunteer at the zoo. So I had a great time.
I bet you did.
I wore a similar necklace to this, except that it had a shark tooth on it.
Of course,
which I wore for much of my teenage years, which is a regrettable choice. But hey,
I went to Hawaii as a kid and got myself a shark tooth necklace, and I thought I was the coolest thing that was ever alive, basically. Because I had a shark tooth necklace. Yeah, because
objectively, you absolutely were.
Yeah, anybody that had a shark tooth necklace in the 90s was pretty cool.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. But so, end of the summer comes, and like this job is like certifiably a summer job. Like, not there was not really an opportunity to continue working there over the winter when everyone went back to school and like everything kind of died way down. So like very suddenly,
industry really takes a hit during the summer.
Yeah, it's a very seasonal industry, the shark touching. And And in fact, there was some stuff going on with the sharks. Like the sharks were not in great health owing to being grabbed by young children, and they needed to like refinish the bottom. They like, I don't think that the gravel that was at the bottom of the tank, the sharks were like rubbing against it to try to get away from people. And that was like causing redfin and stuff. So they needed to shut it down for a period of time anyway to like reglaze the bottom and reconceive of how this all worked. So I suddenly, for the first time in my life, am like, oh no, I don't have a job and I need a job. And so for all the like thought and care that went into getting my first job, my second job, some friends of mine that I had through church, were like, oh yeah, they all worked at the Cheeseburger in Paradise in Castleton, in Indiana. And they're like, yeah, we always need people. So I like, walked in and did the interview, which I remember was like the manager just being like, hey, what do you do if somebody, a customer gets angry with you? And he's like, the answer is ask a manager. I'm like, oh, I ask a manager? He's like, yes, excellent choice. And that was the answer to every question. And so I passed that and I got a job at the Cheeseburger in Paradise as a busser. And I was a pretty decent busser, troublesome kid, shark tooth necklace, mostly looking out for like young ladies that were at the restaurant, But I never could make server there, which is why I eventually left. And I learned a very valuable lesson. I've learned many valuable lessons, but one of them that I remember, I was talking to the general manager and I was like, hey, I want to make server. I believe I'm really good. This other guy who was a busser for less long than me and was a really crappy worker, he made server. Why didn't I make server? And he was like, listen, he was a terrible busser. So I thought he'd be a natural server, and you're a fantastic busser, which is why you're never going to make server. Mm-hmm. He's like, you're just too good of a busser. And I was like, oh man, okay, that is a lesson I will carry with me throughout my life. You never want to be too good.
Job to ascend.
That's right.
Yes.
You never want to be so good at your current job that you're never going to be in line for the next one, because that stuff does totally happen. As a person who runs a company now, I kind of get it. But the reason I bring this all up is, so when I was working there as a busser, there were way too many bussers because we were paid like nothing. And so we kind of stand around and chat. And this one guy, his name was Blake, actually.
Oh.
I forgot about that. His name was William Blake, but he went by Blake. So anyway, he and I are just talking in the server alley, and he's like, all right, who's the best songwriter in history? Ooh. And I, go with like the sort of standard answer. I'm like, but probably Bob Dylan, I assume. That's kind of the answer. And he's like, I knew that you would say Bob Dylan. And I was like, what? I don't know. Who's the best songwriter? And he's like, well, it sure as shit ain't Bob Dylan. And I was like, who is it? Tell me who it is. He's like, it's Tom Waits. And I, at the tender age of 16 or so, am like, who the heck is Tom Waits? Mm-hmm. And so first Blake in my life is like, come out to my car. And I'm not sure how, but we totally just like left and went out to his car in the middle of a shift.
I don't think that the regulations at the Cheeseburger in Paradise are super strict. I think that's how you pulled it off.
No, yeah, for sure. It was a fairly lax place in a lot of ways. And so we just go to his car and he puts in, I believe it was Blood Money that he put on first. And I'm like sitting in this pickup truck listening to this like, and I was like, what in the heck is this? Yeah. And he's like, but you got to listen to the lyrics. And I was like, okay. And I was never really a big lyric guy, but kind of dug in. And I was like, oh shoot, these are actually really good. I see exactly what you're talking about. Mm-hmm. And we kept like rolling on. I think we rolled into Real Gone. Like we did like at least an album or two before coming back into work.
Learn about Tom Waits on the clock, baby.
Yeah, man. That's the only, I think that Tom Waits would be proud.
He would. Yes.
And I left this time in this pickup truck being like, whoa, this is so cool. Because do you remember that period in life when you're a teenager, you have the ability to hear about like a musician for the first time that you've never ever heard of. Like there's a moment that somebody's like, oh, the Pixies. And you're like, who are the Pixies? And they're like, oh, To Be You. Here's a whole album of incredible songs that are going to blow your mind that you've never heard before.
And I'm guessing that like that's a little less common now because the moment you hear about something, you can go, well, let me check that out.
Yeah, I wonder about that too, because it definitely felt like when I was growing up, there was like this whole bevy of secret knowledge that like people slightly older than you had. And the only, these things would just be revealed to you in their own time, like bit by bit, like you would hear about who Chuck Palahniuk was and be like, oh my God, books can be like this. That's so crazy. Or Charles Bukowski, or Tom Waits or the Pixies, or like all these, or like My Bloody Valentine, or like so many things.
I read an entire biography about Black Flag before I ever heard a note.
Is that right?
Yeah. Like,
was it, why did you get a biography before you got like a CD?
It's a slightly condensed version of it. It was a book that totally changed my life, called Our Band Could Be Your Life.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. And I just was like, oh, this is like all about punk rock. I'm into punk rock. I should learn more about what came before, because obviously I was like deep into the Warped Tour era of it all. And I didn't know a lot about the early stuff because I was too young, wasn't around for it. And I certainly didn't grow up with it. So I think Black Flag might have been the first band in that book, I think. Or they were just one that was like, that name sounds cool. Let me read about that. So I read the whole Black Flag story before I ever heard a note of it.
And when you heard Black Flag for the first time, after like knowing the whole ethos about them, was it like underwhelming? Were you blown away? How did you feel about it?
It was exactly what I expected.
Really?
Yeah, it was.
I feel like usually the answer there is like, oh, this is what it sounds like.
No, it was exactly what I expected. I was familiar enough with the genre at large because there were bands doing things like that at the time. I mean, it wasn't the popular thing, everybody was all emo and screamo and whatever, but there were certainly a lot of street punk bands and like bands that were throwing back to that. So it wasn't something I was completely foreign, or it wasn't completely foreign to me. So I was very much ready for it. So yeah,
that's a nice way to be. I would have these sorts of scenarios as well. And I remember like circumstances where I knew about a band, I'd heard about the history of the band, and then I would like buy a CD because of all that. And I definitely had like some moments where I was like, wait, this is what this sounds like? Like specifically, I remember Talking Heads was one of those for me, which like remains like one of, if not my very favorite bands of all time. But when I first got it, I got a greatest hits CD because like that was a thing you did back then because you're like, what's the most bang for my buck here? Brand new band to me. Just give me the good stuff, right?
Yeah.
And all of those first couple of tracks, like the really early days when it's more, like kind of punkish Talking Heads, really didn't do it for me. I couldn't contextualize it. And so I was just like, what is this? This is like thin nothing music. It just didn't really like vibe to me. And it was like a bunch of listens before I got to like track 10, which is Once in a Lifetime, like the Remain in Light stuff as well, after that. And that's where I was like, oh, this is amazing. And then I could contextualize it. And then I came to like the early stuff after that as well. But I don't know if that happens anymore. But this is not the old guys sit around like the two old Muppets and talk about why kids and music these days isn't what it used to be podcast.
I don't know that that's bad. It's just a completely different experience. There was all sorts of times, I can't remember like every example of it, where I would read about a band or hear about a band long before I ever actually listened to them.
Yeah.
In fact, there's actually a semi-recent example of this. And Nick, if you're listening to this, I apologize. But there was a great kind of melodic punk band from that era called the Swellers. Yeah. And I was not familiar with them, but I read about them a bunch of times, like as like the best band that you're not listening to type of article, and never really got around to it because it wasn't in my pocket. And fast forward to now, Nick, who runs Wonder Effects, is the main dude from the Swellers. And so I didn't actually start listening to the Swellers until like on a regular basis until like 3 years ago when he came on the podcast. I'm like, you're the guy from the Swellers? And then I go back and listen and I'm like, this is the best band that I wasn't listening to at the time. They're incredible. So that it still can kind of happen, I guess.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
There's always opportunities, though they do go down downhill a little bit. Like the bands that I'm like, oh my gosh, I've never listened to Felt before, like until like a few years ago. And I was like, this is a really good band, but it's not discovering the Pixies for the first time. It kind of declines a little bit in terms of what's out there.
You get through them. I feel like if you're a big music fan, especially like the more alternative stuff that we kind of gravitate towards, you eventually you get through the heavy hitters, and then you're left with, if there's going to be another heavy hitter, it's probably going to be a new band,
yes,
because we've went through a lot of the required listening already.
Yes. But so Tom Waits is one of these bands for me. And honestly, like, I mean, I thought it was such a cool thing because I did like it, but the fact that it's such like kind of oppressive music to people that hear it for the first time, I think was like especially appealing to me because I was like, oh, I'm going to be like listening to this on my Discman at school. And then people are going to be like, what are you listening to? And I'm like, oh, take a listen. And they'll be like, what's that? And they're like, yeah, that's right. I like super cool stuff that you couldn't even begin to comprehend.
You can't handle it, man.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. So I dive kind of like, very, very deep into it. And I truly love Tom Waits. And he's like a guy with a very deep catalog that like it takes some time to really get to know all the different stuff. But I kind of dove in because of how all that happened in that truck outside of the Cheeseburger in Paradise. I dove into the later years Tom Waits, and that's the Tom Waits that I've always really gravitated to. But that's not all of the Tom Waits that exists out there. And in fact, I think a lot of people maybe are more familiar with the earlier stuff. And so I wanted to talk about Tom Waits as a version of Reinvention, because I think that there's no musician, maybe there's probably some rival stories, but he has one of the most impressive stories of a complete transformation that happens kind of mid-career, and I think that doesn't happen often in general. I think there's some parallels.
In that it was on his sophomore release, and he released 3 albums, right? It was like, 6 albums deep, is it something like that? 4 albums deep, something.
So it's it's a while. So I mean, you've got the big record that this happens on is Swordfishtrombones, which is his 7th album, which is fairly deep in the catalog. And so just to kind of like catch some folks up there that maybe aren't as familiar. So Tom Waits, gets his start in like the late 60s. He's a California guy, and he's like playing in places around LA. And in the early years, he's just doing like a lot of Bob Dylan covers on the piano. But he like sort of quickly kind of finds this particular character that really works for him. And that character is that of a sort of drunken piano balladeer. And like a lot of the songs that I think people that aren't that familiar with Tom Waits know, like The Piano Has Been Drinking, Not Me, are this version. This guy that it's the guy that when you walk into a bar that you've never been into before, and it's 2 a.m. and everyone's not really paying attention to the music, and the guy that's playing the music is just as drunk as everybody else. Tom Waits is that guy.
Yes.
Playing the piano.
Chain smoking, hammered.
Yeah. Exactly.
And still somehow able to play a melody for you.
Yes, and the lyrics are super clever. I mean, I do think he's like one of the better wordsmiths. He just has this sort of knack for puns. Like one that I often quote is champagne for my real friends, real pain for my sham friends. As a toast. A bottle
in front of me instead of having a frontal lobotomy. I mean,
exactly.
So
yes.
Good. Yeah.
He just has this amazing knack for deconstructing little words and creating these clever little limericks, and he relies on that for a long time, like basically all of the 1970s. He's doing this thing and finding, like slightly different versions of it. Like you get, more saxophones come in at some points. You have, orchestral arrangements that are popping in at some points. But it's all basically kind of playing off of the same shtick at some level. And to be clear, like, I think this man's an amazing songwriter, and there's a lot of stuff even from this era that went on to be covered by the Eagles and other bands like that. So I mean, like, there's great stuff happening in here by all means. It's just a little bit of a one-trick pony.
It's all a variation on the mostly exact same theme, pretty much.
Yeah, exactly. With a lot of different kind of riffs on it. And so, and Tom Waits like gave a lot of amazing interviews, but they're all like filtered through the Tom Waits character. So there's not really like, it's very difficult to be like, this is what he was thinking at this time. Or like, this is how he felt, or what like he authentically, why he came to do this. So a lot of this is like sort of just our take on what probably was happening. And if you haven't, like, to anyone out there, his old interviews on like late night, are amazing.
Yeah,
absolutely amazing. I mean, he's just so clever and so funny. And you can tell like David Letterman always seemed like it was like one of his favorite guests to have on. He could just hear him talk for minutes and minutes and minutes. And so much so that like he was one of the musicians that not only would perform, but like they would sit him down in the chair and let him do his whole bit because it was so good.
Yes.
Which they don't do for everybody.
No. A
lot of musicians, they're like, yeah, exactly. I think a lot of musicians are like, if I don't have a guitar or a piano in front of me, I am mortified.
Right. Yeah. You almost use it as a comfort when you are in. There's a lot of musicians are, despite what the common perception might be, are kind of introverted. And so they use these guitars and stuff almost like a shield, like something to hide behind. And Tom
and
did not need it.
Even just like a microphone stand, know, just like that little 1-inch piece of chrome feels like it's something between you and the audience. And not having that can be mortifying.
Well, yeah, and it's even just like something to do with your hands. Like, what do I do with my hands when I don't have anything? I don't know,
Exactly. So, anyway, Tom Waits is on pretty much the same, as far as I know, the same record label throughout this whole time. He's on Asylum Records, and he's making all this stuff. And it's not that it falls off. That's something to like note here. Like the last couple of albums in this whole period, like Blue Valentine's, great. Heart Attack and Vine is like on one of the 1001 albums to listen to before you die. So it's not a thing where it's like, oh, his star's waning, nobody cares anymore, they're kind of tired of the shtick. And it's just not what it used to be. It's really not that. I mean, he's still making great stuff. I think he maybe just gets a little bored.
That's what it feels like.
From it. And so as best as anyone can kind of tell, what really happens is he gets asked to do the soundtrack for this film called One from the Heart, which I haven't seen. It's a Francis Ford Coppola film. And on that, he's mostly doing like duets with Crystal Gale, I believe. And this is generally thought to be a not that good record. Even though like the studio records up to this point were really good, this is kind of that point of like, it just feels a little schmaltzy. It feels kind of done. The movie's, I haven't actually seen it, but it's supposed to be like not really that good. And so I imagine, I like to think that Tom, at this point is like, it's not like the bottom's fallen out. It's not like he's, not like a well-respected, artist doing a really cool thing. But I think he sees that first inkling of things maybe getting a little stale, of like, if I go to make another record like this, that's going to be the one that it's not really it. Right. And so a really fortuitous thing happens at the same time, which is that on that movie, he's with a person named Kathleen Brennan, who's involved under Coppola and working in the movie itself. And he'd met her previously, but this is where I guess they spend a whole lot of time. And interestingly, they actually go on to get married right around that time. And this becomes kind of the love of his life. They have children together. This is the person.
Is this like, what era are we talking? This is like early 80s?
Yeah, like 1980 or so. I'm not sure exactly when they were filming the movie and when it came out and all that sort of stuff, but like about 1980, I think, is when they got married.
Okay.
So like it's all kind of right within here. And she has this really important effect on Tom Waits. And this is something that I think is super fascinating because for a lot of people, if you think about your friends in your life, whether you're a guy or a girl, and it's kind of a common sense thing that when people get married, it kind of rounds out a lot of their eccentricities, It's like, oh, he used to be a wild guy, but then he got married and, she kind of tamed him down. Now he's just a bit. Yeah, exactly. Or same thing, for a female friend or anything like that. That's kind of the general sense, That is not what happens here, at least not musically.
Not musically. No.
Yeah, it's very possible that that's what's happening in terms of, Tom's not spending nights out on a Saturday night until 3 a.m., like looking for that next drink. But musically, that's not what happens at all, because Kathleen Brennan, very much Tom Waits like attributes this to her, seems to bring out the real weird in Tom.
Oh, yeah.
Which is pretty cool. I mean, I think that we could all... Who doesn't want to find their person like that? That's like, I don't think you're doing you enough. I think you need to double down on the weird stuff about you.
Yeah. Well, I could see, I'm making this conversation up in my head, but I could see them like sitting down and him being like, I just really want to put you hear that clanging? I kind of want to put that on a record, but I don't know like why I would do that. And her being like, yeah, you should do that. Just figure it out.
Yeah. Yeah. I like to imagine that it's like, you marry someone and she's like, I don't think you should be staying out till 3 a.m. drinking with the boys. I think you should be staying out till 8 a.m. drinking with the boys. I think we need to double down on all the eccentricities here.
Soon.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah. You're not nearly drunk enough. We gotta, up those numbers, right?
Yeah, these are rookie numbers in this game.
So I don't know if quite that happens with the barfly tendencies exactly, but it happens musically. And I think that, Kathleen Brennan, like she comes from the film world. So I imagine that she, kind of saw something in Tom of more of a cinematic character, almost more than just like a purely musical character, which I think makes sense. I mean, he was a character long before
movies later.
Oh yeah, very much so. And I mean, it always had a lot of friends, Jim Jarmusch and him are like, have been tight for a very long time. So I think he was always kind of like involved in that world, which is kind of weird actually, because Tom Waits always hated MTV. Like he always hated the idea of music, like music videos. I think he just found them to be really kind of lame. But I mean, for a guy that's done a lot of acting, and whose music has been utilized all over the place in really great, situations and scores. It's a little funny to me that, he felt like music videos were dumb, because I feel like, I don't know.
Well, maybe
those are kind of similar.
Wasn't able to make the kind of weird music video he wanted to make.
Well, that's very possible.
Like they're like, no. You just need to be in a velvet robe and, doing classic MTV stuff. And he's like, that's not it. I could very much imagine that.
Yeah. And I mean, the one like of the album that I'm getting to, the one music video that exists from it is for the song In the Neighborhood. And that's just like a weird shaky cam with Tom Waits wearing a stovepipe hat and holding a cane, kind of shaking it at the camera. A whole bunch. Which I think is kind of great, It's
fun.
But anyway, so, this really reshapes Tom Waits's songwriting, and he breaks with his like longtime producer that had done, I think, every album that he'd done up to that point, and decides to produce the next record on his own, gives himself kind of the most freedom. At this point, he's still on the same record label, Asylum Records, and he goes in the studio to make an album called Swordfishtrombones, all one word. Mm-hmm. And this is where things get a little crazy. Because Tom Waits, up to this point, like everything's the piano and then some other things accentuating the piano. But on Swordfishtrombones, it's marimba and like glass harmonica and all of these like very strange, carnival-esque instruments, and also, weird percussion that people are hitting with, like hitting like brake pads with a drumstick and things like this. It's a complete and total musical break from what's happening, on all these previous records. And it's not even just the music itself, though. I think the music is the most striking. His voice, he finds some freedom to go to some different places with his voice. And it's worth noting, I mean, the Tom Waits voice existed even before this point, where he's doing that, that kind of deep guttural howl thing.
Oh yeah.
But he finds a lot more kind of richness of characters on this record, in my opinion. And also like lyrically, there's some wild stuff happening. I mean, you have like Frank's Wild Years, which is like about a guy being driven mad by all the little things in the world and burning down a house, or I think he's driving a nail through his wife's brain, and there's this little Chihuahua named Carlos that he hates, and the dog definitely dies. He really hated that dog.
He really hated it. Yeah.
In that, so you have like this sort of confluence of these like very out there musical themes, these very out there lyrical themes, and this sort of wild voice. And if you haven't heard this record, you really kind of have to hear the record to know what I'm talking about here. The opener is this like really short song called Underground that's amazing, about like there's a world going on underground, underneath everything that like regular people see in the world. There's this kind of crazy underbelly down by the roots of it all, where these things are happening. And Tom Waits becomes, if he wasn't already, kind of the poet laureate of that, of that sort of underground world. And you have like my favorite song on this record is 16 Shells from a 30-06, which is a classic sort of, rockin' song. I sound like an old man. It's a classic rockin' little number. It's got a real driving beat to it.
Yeah, something you can really shake your tail to,
Yeah, but it is. It's one of these like, kind of like dump rocker songs that he becomes kind of known for. And this is a good moment to bring up like a great story that I'm just paraphrasing. But Tom Waits is telling this story at some point, and he talks about like going to a music store and going to the piano section, which is like the instrument he played for forever, and nobody knew who he was, even though he's kind of like this legendary guy, written all these hit songs and all this sort of stuff. And he's like, but the other day I went down to the dump, and they're like, "Oh my God, you're Tom Waits." He's like, everyone at the city dump knows exactly who I am.
That's amazing.
And it's this record that really, I think engendered Tom Waits to the guys that work at the dump.
Yep.
To me, like it's a very it's like a musical version of Charles Bukowski in a lot of ways. Like it's these stories of these crazy people that are like kind of one percenters, like unhinged from the regular world, and also like stories of people like there's the song about like a soldier's things, his medals being sold in the dollar bin at the at a garage sale and things like this. So they are stories of regular people, but they're all kind of like fallen through the cracks or forgotten in some form or fashion. And the ability to like combine telling the stories of those people with doing it in such a unusual way is, I think, what's so cool about this record.
I think the dump story, actually, I think, now that I'm really thinking about it, I've heard that one before, but it didn't really click in my brain. The people who work at the city dump, whether they participate or not, have a direct connection to that weird underbelly. They see everything we don't want to look at anymore. Everything. And when they say like, you wouldn't believe the stuff people throw away, I think that can be both like, well, that's actually worth money, or like, you wouldn't believe what came out of the Marquardt garbage can that he's trying to erase from history, How did they get all that blood on that lamp? Exactly. Yep.
Yeah.
So they have this like weird direct connection to that kind of weird underbelly of the world that we'd all like to forget, but super exists, and in some way just drives everything.
And that's what this music is about, right? That those become the stories that he wants to tell. And what's really interesting is like, I think Rain Dogs is the next album. We'll talk about it in a few.
I love Rain Dogs. Ugh.
Yeah, that's the masterpiece. Well, let's zoom right into that. But I'll quickly say, Swordfishtrombones, he finishes and he gives it to Asylum Records, and they're like, no, we are absolutely not doing anything with this. And I don't know if it's because they thought it was bad, or just because they're like, everyone knows you as the smoky piano drunk guy. This is not what they want. Give the people more of what they want, which is always how record labels are. They want predictable revenue. That's like the golden goose. And the best way to predict revenue is to do the same thing again.
Yep.
And again and again and again.
Over again.
It's pretty easy to know, here's how much money we're going to put into promoting it. we're not going to lose our shirts by overspending. We're not going to, underspend and not give it enough. It just becomes really obvious and predictable, right?
Whatever that quote from AC/DC is, where it's like, some people say we made 9 records that all sound the same. I take offense to that. We've made 11 records that all sound the same, or whatever it is. I butchered that a little bit, but something like
and
that.
I think early AC/DC sounds very different from later AC/DC, but that's neither here nor there on this episode.
Yes,
that's another episode in and of itself.
Yes.
But so Island Records, which is Chris Blackwell, which I should have probably brought up in my first episode that I was talking about Lee Scratch Perry, because, Chris Blackwell was super instrumental in finding Bob Marley and building up a lot of like that reggae music and all that. But this is a company that's like a little bit more comfortable taking risks at this point. And so they hear it. And as far as I know, are just like, yeah, all right.
Sounds good.
We'll put it out. No one's ever heard anything like this ever before in their whole lives. Why don't we put out the record there? Right. And this album does well. It's a little bit hard nowadays to like separate how people would have perceived something at the time, because I know that people were like, what in the hell is this?
Right.
That liked the stuff up to that point. But I think that probably a lot of people were won over by not just this record, but the records kind of after it, to being like, oh, okay, this is worthwhile. And so, the next record, that is Rain Dogs. And Rain Dogs is like the Tom Waits masterpiece.
The song itself, oh my goodness, I love that song. That record does so much for me.
And that song is about like dogs that like, go out are sniffing for something, but then the rain, covers the scent and then they're lost.
Yep.
What a cool metaphor for people at like certain circumstances of their lives, and Tom Waits is just full of these, and Rain Dogs, could be its own episode entirely, but that's where
Maybe
things really come together. So like interestingly to me, like Swordfishtrombones does not have Mark Ribot on it. His like long running guitar player that, has like these very unique sort of Tom Waitsy lines, but it kind of has those lines already. I actually had always thought it was Mark Ribot on Swordfishtrombones. Then I looked it up to do this and was like, oh, who is it? And it's one of the guys that was in Little Feat, but he's doing like that Mark Ribot thing. So maybe that's a little bit as Tom Waitsy as it is Mark Ribot.
Yeah. I have a feeling that's probably true.
Yeah, but Mark Ribot joins on Rain Dogs, and that's where things really, really go right. Because Swordfishtrombones, I think, is like a little bit more. It's a little more carnival-y, which you can kind of see in the album cover a little bit.
It's more carnival-y, and it's more. To me, it feels like he's like almost discovering in some ways. Like, oh, I can do whatever I want, so I'm gonna do whatever I want. And then Rain Dogs is more like, okay, let's reel that in just a tiny bit, and make this a little more cohesive and a little more lined up with old Tom Waits slightly in some ways.
Yeah. That's right. Like how there's like that tribe in Africa that like when they go through the mitochondrial DNA testing, it's like, one of the earliest tribes in like sort of in terms of human genetic diversity. And you look at these people and like some of them have blue eyes, some of them have green eyes. Like you can like see the face of everyone in the world that ever came out after in all of this like genetic diversity in the tribe. Swordfishtrombones is kind of that record. There's like little like hints of all of these future projects that come from Tom Waits. Like, I mean, Frank's Wild Years is like this little like poem song in this, and that becomes like a whole character and record later on. You have like the Black Rider voice appearing at some point. You have some of those like Rain Dogs, like, crusty ballady things that are kind of appearing here. So it becomes like that sort of unlock of like, I can, as you said, I can do anything. And I'm going to. Right. And we're going to see what kind of sticks and what kind of lands. And then Rain Dogs distills it a little bit. He's still doing a lot more, like a lot of different various voices and stuff. But that's where I think he kind of hones, like, it gets a little bit tighter in terms of songcraft in some ways. You do end up with like these tighter songs, but it gets more avant-garde in terms of instrumentation.
Yes.
You know, and that's where you do have the like, people hitting like a brake drum on a car. I don't know car parts. You probably know exactly what car part it is better than me.
But yeah, various car parts. A brake drum would be an interesting. Yeah, that probably is a brake drum.
Is that a part of a car? It just had drum in it, so it seemed like maybe that's what it was.
A brake drum is a part of a car. Probably not on one that you've driven, but it definitely is on old cars and.
But maybe early 1980s Tom Waits.
It definitely had a lot of access to brake drums back then.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah, so you get this blend of a lot of weird old instruments on like in terms of horns and like stuff like that, and then just banging on a lot of different stuff to make these crazy, cacophonous, chaotic, percussion sounds. And that is even happening. What's the song on Swordfishtrombones that? Which is it? I think it's probably In the Neighborhood. I'm blanking on it, but one of them he's like putting rice on a bass drum and hitting the bass drum to have the rice kind of to kind of sound like people walking around on the street and just all the general chaos and all that. So you just get you get both more chaos and more refinement on Rain Dogs. Mm-hmm. But I think that something interesting there to me is that when going through these big kind of reinventions, it's often not the first thing that is like the masterpiece,
Yeah.
The first thing is just it's possible. It was bold enough to just take this left turn. And then it's the second thing when it really all kind of comes together and makes sense. You took some lumps and learned some things on the first one. And then it all kind of makes sense perfectly after that. You know what I mean?
Yeah. That does seem to fit the trajectory here. And then I don't want to like jump too far ahead because I feel like it's a little bit of a wrench in the gears of this reinvention tale, which is the record. What I was first introduced to Tom Waits by is Mule Variations. Yeah. Which is incredible. But like that's got probably arguably his most straightforward stuff on it as well. Yep. I mean, Hold On is just anybody who's going to like that song.
What a unbelievable song.
Yeah. So good. But then also he does still bring in that character. I mean, that has two of my favorite Tom Waits tracks on it. Hold On, obviously, which is undeniably great. But then, what is he building in there?
I reference like what's he building in there all the time.
And no one
it's a nice way to find the other like Waits. Yeah, exactly. I was just telling you because we were talking about Burn After Reading, the Coen Brothers movie. Yep. Where George Clooney is building something in the basement the whole time.
Yes, and I discovered what it was,
and it all builds up. Did it meet your expectations? Obviously, we can't say what it is for anyone that hasn't seen it.
We will get kicked off of YouTube, but it is watch the video or watch the movie rather. You'll figure it out. But what is he building in there is like. I have a whole project in mind that I'm trying to do directly because of that song
really?
/ story. Yeah, I've been working on it for a long time, like in fits and spurts. And I realized I didn't realize when I started working on it, it's like a dystopian, like sci-fi thing in a similar style. And I got done with like the first track and I was like, oh, this is just like an extended version of what is he building in there, except with a more obvious story to it.
And I think it's well armed for that because that's a very short song. I mean, you don't know what he's building in there in the song. It's so good.
And the weird clanging and like,
yep.
I keep using that word because Tom always clangs. He's always got a clang going on. And in that one, there's like, you can tell he's recreating the sound of somebody doing something inside their house we all have a neighbor like that.
Yep.
You know what I mean? Like, what is he building in there? What is he doing
that's what I love, right? Tom Waits is always able to find these things that feel like these kind of exotic and weird experiences, but they're so relatable because everyone's had like a weird neighbor and you're like, what's he building in there in the garage? And it's nothing, but you've had that experience before. And that's what touches on so much of it. I had a
neighbor at one point that like, I just watched them hauling endless bags of concrete into their shed. I don't know how many bags of concrete they put in that shed or what he was doing with it. But in my head, I was hearing Tom Waits what is he building in there? What
and you're always imagining like he must have dug a very deep hole and is sealing it all up in concrete. And what does he not want me to know that's at the bottom of that hole?
At the bottom of the hole, exactly. I mean, it was a lot of concrete. I very much think he was either making an absurdly thick cement pad in his shed for some reason, or exactly what you just said. I can't think of anything else that he would be doing.
There's a part of us that always wants to be like, how does this relate to murder? Somehow someone has been murdered and they're covering it up. These people, they look normal. They're just living here in the neighborhood, but they're not. Well, underneath, there's this undercurrent, and that is the Tom Waits thing. Is like, what's that undercurrent underneath everyone?
Well, unfortunately, not to completely distract, but that literally happened in my town. When I was growing up, there was 2 girls that I went to school with that disappeared, and they were murdered by a guy. And like, I almost knocked on this man's door to try to buy his Pontiac Firebird that was sitting in the front yard. Like, shoot. Yeah. It was very famous case.
The serial killer Baumeister, that happened at my school. His kids went to my school.
Oh, really? Wow.
Yeah. He was the one where like
old Herb Baumeister.
That's right. Yeah. You know.
Of course I do. I'm a sick, disgusting, horrible person. I know all the serial killers.
For me with the Tom Waits thing, to circle back slightly.
Let's get back on topic.
I like, and I feel a little chintzy about this, but I just like a lot of the short rollicking ones. Like I like Lie to Me on Orphans, Ballers and Bastards. Mm-hmm. That's just like this, like, you got to lie to me, baby. Like these short little 2-minute songs that are totally just like 1950s, bluesy songs that just have some fun instrumentation to them. I also really love I Don't Want to Grow Up.
Yeah.
Because that's like such a great, everyone has felt that way.
Of course.
Being in touch with their inner child.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, for anyone out there that hasn't, dug into Tom Waits, there's a lot for you that you can dig into. And a lot of these characters that come in these early kind of weirdo turn records become like full albums later on. He like leans into them, independently as time goes on. But what I think is so interesting, like I said, going back to the general theme for me, it's this reinvention. It's that you have to, like, you're successful. You're like 10, 12 years into your career. You've got a thing going. You could probably just keep doing it. And then at that point, to take that risk and kind of throw that all away to make something completely new and completely different, that might, work or might not. That's a very bold thing to do.
Oh yeah.
And it's no surprise his label was like, no. And it wouldn't surprise me if every label was like, no, we're not going to touch this. It's just too different.
A label back then too, at least a lot more than you do now.
So he had to have one.
He couldn't even just be like, well, I'm doing it myself then. I mean, maybe he could have, but it would have been way harder than it is now.
Yeah. I mean, he would be doing the like Minor Threat thing and like making cassette tapes and passing them out. Like, that's difficult. He's a more established guy than that. He's like on late night shows and stuff like that. So I think that's just incredibly bold. And I was thinking, like, if there's musical versions of it, and I'm sure there are some, but I actually like, it reminds me of the McConaissance a little bit, where Matthew McConaughey had like, had been found for the Richard Linklater help me movie about the kids in Texas in high school. Dazed and Confused.
Yes.
He was discovered for that, and I don't know if you know the story of all this, but he was just a guy hanging out in a bar, and Richard Linklater like bumped into him and is like, I've got a part for you. You're going to be the guy that's like, the best thing about high school girls, I get older, they stay the same age. So we can only assume that Matthew McConaughey was that guy. Because he was very much cast like, he was not an actor, as far as I know. He was just pulled in off the street to be that guy.
Here, be a predator in our movie. You seem like
one. Right. And then he kind of, from there, he falls into the rom-com trap of like, I assume making good money, a lot of work, just doing all these sort of like sappy,
he's charming.
All right rom-coms. Yeah, exactly. And is doing that like the whole 2000s, the whole of it, all of it, doing the Christmas movies and all that stuff.
To the point where I was like, Matthew McConaughey's in this is gonna suck.
Right. And then as far as I know, the first one that did it was Mud. because Mud
so
preceded a few, and that he's got this thing, and it is like, I mean, it's not the risk level that Tom Waits took, because it's not like he had to like make this movie and not know if he'd get paid the way you do when you self-produce an album. Yeah, but he does do this character, and that character is like very similar to Dallas Buyers Club and of course True Detective that would come later, but it all kind of comes out in this movie Mud. And similarly, Mud's great, but that was like a year or two before True Detective.
Yep.
And that to me is like the masterpiece.
The real moment. Yeah. It's easy, like Dallas Buyers Club and True Detective kind of happened seemingly culturally, at least at the same time, basically. Mm-hmm. And then Interstellar, like it totally changed. And this is a complete sidebar a little bit, but Mud is a very close to my heart movie. I love everything about it, basically. Mm-hmm. But I don't know if you know the guy behind it, Jeff Nichols. You're familiar with him? Okay. Jeff Nichols is at this point a very well-respected movie maker. You would probably like every movie he's ever done. Okay. He's always collabing with like Michael Shannon, who was in Mud also.
Oh, yeah. I love Michael Shannon.
Yeah. Midnight Special. Watch it. You'll love it. It's incredible.
Oh, I almost watched that one recently, actually. So weirdly, I watched Midnight Cowboy, like the late 60s.
Also great.
And was like, this seems natural.
Yeah.
I think it was on Next on Amazon when I finished Midnight Cowboy.
It's like, he likes midnight movies.
Well, I mean, that's like John Voight moving to New York to, meeting Dustin Hoffman and all that. Anyway.
Yeah. So Jeff Nichols is the reason I became aware of him was through his brother, Ben Nichols of Lucero.
Oh, really?
Yes. Who is an artist of ours now.
Yeah.
Which I wouldn't have imagined back then. But
Mud is a very Lucero movie, if such a thing, if that was a thing.
I believe, and this does hold with Jeff Nichols movies. I believe there is some Lucero music in the ending credits, if I remember correctly, which he did Bike Riders as well. Mm-hmm. Bike Riders was a Lucero song that was based on that book. They both got inspired by that kind of separately. Huh. Yeah. So there's like I have a deep history with the Nichols family of media. And so, yeah, Jeff's an incredible filmmaker. Like almost everything he's ever done has been so good. Oh, Shotgun Stories. That was his first movie.
Okay.
You got to watch Shotgun Stories.
I will check it out.
Also Michael Shannon. Anyway.
Love Michael Shannon. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. Noted. So leapfrogging doubly back.
Yeah.
First to McConaughey and then back to Tom Waits.
Yes.
The thing the sense that I get with Matthew McConaughey is that, he kind of accidentally happened into acting. And then, in the way that when you're like young and getting into something, it just kind of happens to you. And you just kind of have to roll with opportunity as it comes. And I like to imagine that, at the end of the 2000s, he was kind of like, for one, how did I get here? Why am I doing like all this? I don't feel like I had agency in like how I landed pigeonholed here. But I also think he got better at acting throughout this whole period of kind of accidentally acting.
Had to have.
And I think that that's what landed him in like, in Mud and all that of like, actually, I'm like pretty good at this now. And I don't know that, that all fully parallels with Tom Waits exactly, but I imagine there's something similar going on where you go from like, playing in a club in LA and then people discover you and now you get signed and then you put something out and then you go on tour and then you got to do it again and then that works and then you do, and you're getting songwriting credit. I imagine that there's maybe a slightly similar parallel where you find yourself 10 years later from that of like, I didn't intend this to go exactly this way. It kind of just happened, which is what life does to you, right? I think that happens to a lot of people.
I think it's happened to us. Although we didn't do necessarily the big reinvention in the public eye the way these people did, but I think you and I definitely didn't think we would be here in our 20s.
No, and maybe the big reinvention's coming.
Oh no.
Maybe we're doing it and we don't even know.
Oh, that's true. Yes,
that can happen too.
You don't always have control of your reinvention.
I've got long hair now. I mean,
yeah. And
I could be anybody.
Well, I'm pretty much the same. Maybe
I was golfing this weekend with an old guy and he was like, he looked at my hair and was like, so you play in a rock band? And I was like, no, I don't. But I love that I can be mistaken for that now. I am adjacent to that, but I don't do that exactly.
No, I just help make rock and roll possible.
Those are my people. Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Yes.
So, I mean, life does do that. It's just, I think what's rare is to reach that moment where you're like, all right, I've had enough. I've had enough of just like going down the path that it's pushing me down. I need to take an about face and change it up a little bit there. Mm-hmm. And Tom Waits did that. And I think it's also interesting. A lot of the characters in Tom Waits stories do that too.
Yes.
Like, I mean, that's kind of Frank of Frank's Wild Years. This guy who's just had it.
He's just had enough.
Yes. And there's a lot of that happens with Tom Waits. And that one in particular, I want to bring this up because I enjoy it. He was inspired by a Bukowski poem for that I can't remember which one.
I don't think I could possibly be less surprised that he was inspired by a Bukowski poem.
For sure, right? But specifically, like something that he noted for that song is that like Bukowski would talk about how like it's not the big things in life that make somebody go insane. It's the little things.
It is.
You know, yep. It's not this crazy big thing that happened. It's that like your shoelace snapped in two and you just can't take it anymore.
That's just it. And I think we've all kind of been there where you're just like, oh, I'm so mad about this. And you're like, is it really that big of a deal that you lost a button on your shirt? It's like, no, it's the button on my shirt. It's that McDonald's wasn't serving breakfast. It's that I dinged my car on the way out. It's I stubbed my toe last night. And now I got a tax bill. Like, yep. I'm done.
It's the 100 other things. And yeah. I've had one of them weeks, to be honest.
You have.
So I feel that completely. Where I'm like, I just can't take one more thing, no matter how trivial it may be. I am at 100% carrying capacity of bullshit.
We're going to go full Michael Douglas falling down if one pencil is out of place at this point.
Exactly. So, you know, there's a lot of that in Tom Waits stuff. Well, people push to that point.
I think it's because he's always been really in tune with the human condition, and that isn't something that was talked about as commonly outside of maybe the literary world. And in music at the time, sure, there was maybe some more underground acts kind of focusing on some of that stuff, but to really have somebody that was as prominent as he was really digging in the dirt where humanity is and kind of putting it all on display. Like Frank's Wild Years is such a great example of that, right? Mm-hmm. He's just overwhelmed and he's had enough, and Tom's going to tell you about it.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And I do think, you know, Tom Waits, like he may have been put on this earth for no other reason than that we needed like the best person to play the devil ever. And the Tom Waits version of the devil, I think, is like the best devil, and also maybe like probably the most accurate to what I think the devil would be like. Yeah. You know, he's charming. He knows he's been there. He knows everything. He just has the wrong advice.
That's right. I think that's
he'll listen to you. He's wise, but he's going to steer you into the.
He's like what he's saying too.
You should do it. You know what? You should.
You should do that because you deserve it.
That's right. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Listen to that dark impulse in you. You're right to think that you've had enough.
Well, I don't know if you have some more you want to get into. I have one small Tom Waits story that I just love.
I would love to hear it. Because that is all of my notes that I had. So please.
Cool. So yeah, this is a decent way to wrap this up, I think. So this could be a tall tale. It could be something that didn't really happen. I'm not sure. But the person who told it to me told it on this, as people probably know, I have a podcast as well where I interview different guitar people. And this is the first time I interviewed Frank Iero from My Chemical Romance. He told me this story. He said, as was relayed to him, Tom Waits kept coming into this music store. And he would go, and they didn't really want to bother him, so they just kind of leave him alone. And he'd go up and he'd be looking at the guitars, pick them up, put it back, and he'd leave. Come back in the next day, look at that same guitar, and he'd leave. This happened for a while. Tom kept coming in the same store, looking at the same guitars over and over again. And finally, someone came up to him and said, yeah, Mr. Waits, big fan. Can I help you with anything? I noticed you've been looking at this guitar. And then he looked at it again. He said, no, no songs left in that one and left. I'm like, that's such a good story. Even if it's not true, I love it. It's so good.
That's amazing. And Tom, there are so many like likely apocryphal stories about Tom Waits floating around that everyone heard from a guy. My guess is that he's a far more normal person than we all think.
Oh yeah.
I assume he would be like scarily normal if you hung out with him, and that would be more bothersome than anything else somehow.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you think there are more Bill Murray stories or more Tom Waits stories?
There's more Bill Murray stories because he's like famouser. That's for sure.
Yeah,
but they're similar characters as these sort of beloved people. And it's very sad to me that I don't think I'll ever see Tom Waits live. He did that tour in 2009 or 2010. And I don't know, I was poor, and I'm sure he didn't come to Indianapolis. So that wasn't happening, but I would give anything.
I would love to see
anything.
That's a bucket list one for me, for sure.
Yep.
We'll have to keep our eyes out, see what happens.
Yeah. Who knows? He's getting up there. It's mostly just a lot of great acting and stuff that's available from here. So, yep.
Sounds good. Well, I think that probably wraps this one up. What do you think?
That's all I got, man. I hope it was interesting at some level to you or someone else out there. Anyone, sincerely, I would recommend digging into a lot of the different Tom Waits stuff in the catalog. It's all over the place. So maybe just like listen through like, a compilation or like, best of on whatever streaming platform you like. And if you like the sound of something, dig into the album because there's probably more of it.
I think the songs that we specifically called out, I think you should, maybe at least if it's not for you, because I understand Tom's stuff is not for everybody, at least listen to those ones that we mentioned, Rain Dogs, if you don't like Hold On, you don't have a soul. So
agreed.
That's almost impossible to hate that song. So the ones that we talked about specifically, at least give those a listen and as your starting point and go from there.
Yep. I think you're going to like it. You're going to like the way you look. I guarantee
it.